I was home alone that night, the house empty except for me. It was early spring, and the darkness outside pressed against the windows in a way that made the rooms feel smaller, almost suffocating. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me in charge of a space I had always taken for granted. Normally, the house felt warm and safe, full of small noises and movement, but tonight it was quiet in a way that made every sound I did make echo unnaturally. The floorboards groaned under my weight, the refrigerator hummed, and the wind rattled the window panes, but it all seemed amplified, drawn out, each sound lingering long after it happened. I spent the first hours of the night in the living room, reading on the couch, but I couldn't settle. The silence was heavy. Shadows moved across the walls, cast by the weak light of a street lamp outside, and the shifting shapes made the corners of the room feel full of hidden things. I tried to convince myself it was normal. The house was old, wood creaks, windows rattle, but the rational voice in my head was thin, barely audible over the constant thrum of anxiety that had settled in my chest. Around 11, I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. The tile was cold under my bare feet, and the air smelled faintly of damp from the rain earlier in the day. As I stood there, filling my glass, I heard a sound behind me, soft but distinct, like a footstep on the floor above. My heart jumped. The house has an upstairs I barely use. It was empty and I was alone. I froze, listening. The step didn't repeat, and I convinced myself it was the floor settling, a familiar noise that suddenly seemed alien in the quiet. I drank quickly and returned to the living room, but the unease had taken root. I tried to distract myself with television, but even the background noise wasn't enough. Every small creak made me tense. Every gust of wind against the windows pulled my attention. I went from room to room, checking the doors and windows, making sure everything was locked, the blinds drawn tight. The house felt bigger than it should, the hallways stretching into darkness, the familiar layout somehow unfamiliar when I was alone. The staircase in particular caught my attention. It spiraled upward, the railing polished and smooth under my hand, but the shadows between the steps seemed deeper than they should, hiding shapes that didn't exist. I noticed then that the sound of the wind had changed. It was no longer a uniform whistle or push against the siding. It had developed pauses, rhythms, like it was moving around the house in deliberate ways. I kept thinking I could hear movement outside, subtle shifts in the leaves, scraping sounds against the walls, the faintest shuffle across the patio. I stayed near the living room window for hours, peering out into the night. The yard was empty. The trees at the edge of the property swayed in the breeze, their branches creaking and tapping against one another, but no figure moved among them. Eventually, curiosity overpowered fear. I moved to the back door, the sliding glass panel that looked out toward the yard and the trees beyond. The moonlight fell unevenly across the grass, leaving shadows that seemed to shift as I watched. I pressed my hand to the glass, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The wind shifted, and a branch tapped against the frame, startling me, but still nothing moved. I leaned closer, noticing the ground near the door. There were faint marks in the soil, slight depressions that could have been footprints, but they were irregular, difficult to make out in the dim light. My pulse accelerated. It was easy to tell myself it was just the wind or the rain, that something had fallen or shifted naturally, but my body refused to relax. I moved quietly through the house, checking each room. Upstairs, the bedrooms were exactly as they should be. Nothing had been disturbed, nothing out of place. The closet doors were closed, the beds made, the drawers untouched. Still, the sense of being watched persisted, a weight pressing at the back of my mind, refusing to let go. I descended the stairs slowly, every creak of the wood making me flinch, and returned to the living room. Hours passed. I sat in the same spot, lights on, my eyes scanning the windows. The first hints of dawn began to touch the edges of the blinds, washing the walls with pale light. The house felt different now, almost alive in the morning, ordinary again. I checked the back door one final time. The ground was undisturbed, the marks I had seen in the dark gone without explanation. Nothing had entered, nothing had left. The yard was empty, the woods at the edge silent, the wind fading. When my parents returned, I told them what I had experienced, though I did not dramatize it. They assured me it was nothing. The house settling, the wind, the imagination of someone home alone. I could not argue with their calm logic. The house was just a house, and the night had passed safely. I knew that rationally, but the tension I had felt did not vanish completely. It lingered, a quiet reminder of how different a familiar place can feel when you are alone. When the ordinary sounds of life fall away and you are left only with yourself and the shadows. After that night, I became more attentive to small noises, more cautious when alone. I checked locks carefully, kept lights on longer, and noticed the way shadows shifted in ways I hadn't before. The house had not changed, and yet everything about it felt altered to me. I had stayed alone, and in doing so, I had discovered that silence can weigh heavily, that shadows can seem alive, and that fear does not always need a source beyond the natural world. By the next evening, the house had returned to normal, quiet but familiar, and I understood that what had unsettled me was not the house itself but the awareness of my own solitude within it. I stayed home alone again only rarely, and every time I remembered that night, the way ordinary things can become profound when you are truly alone with them, the way a house can feel endless and silent, and how, sometimes, surviving the night is its own resolution. I stayed alone that weekend, my parents gone for work and leaving the house completely to me. I was 17, and the first night I felt a mixture of freedom and unease, a strange excitement paired with an almost constant tension. The house was quiet in a way I hadn't experienced before, every corner and hallway stretching into shadows that seemed heavier than usual. The air smelled faintly of the remnants of dinner and the faint dampness that had seeped in from an early spring rain earlier that evening. Outside, the yard was dark, bordered by thick woods that pressed close to the property line, a constant wall of shifting shapes and rustling leaves. I started the evening with small tasks, washing dishes, wiping counters, straightening the living room. Each sound I made bounced off the walls, echoing in a house that normally hummed with voices and movement. When I finished, I sank into the couch with my laptop, but I couldn't focus. My mind kept returning to the woods, to the feeling that something beyond the windows was watching, waiting. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself that it was the wind or an animal, anything reasonable. But the sense of being observed persisted, a subtle pressure at the edges of my awareness. The night deepened. The clock read nearly midnight, and the house had fallen completely silent. The usual hum of appliances seemed louder now, almost intrusive. The fridge buzzed in the kitchen, and the heating system cycled on and off with a mechanical rhythm that sounded exaggerated in the stillness. I kept noticing small things: a floorboard creaking in the hallway, the faint shift of shadows from a tree outside brushing against the window, the soft patter of raindrops hitting the roof. Each sound seemed to carry intent, deliberate and precise, even though I knew it was ordinary, harmless noise. I got up to check the back door, a sliding glass pane that looked out toward the darkened yard and the woods beyond. The moonlight barely illuminated the grass and the tree trunks, leaving most of the space black. I pressed my forehead to the glass and scanned the area, noting the subtle shapes that the wind made in the branches. At first, nothing moved, and I allowed myself a small sense of relief. Then I noticed a set of footprints in the thin layer of frost that had formed on the stone patio. They were human, small but not childlike, walking from the edge of the woods toward the door. They ended abruptly, as if the person had vanished in place. My stomach tightened, and my breath caught. The prints were clear, impossibly crisp, yet the night was silent. I stepped back from the door and tried to rationalize it. Perhaps they were old prints, frozen from earlier in the day and overlooked. But the frost was thin, fragile, and the prints had a freshness that suggested recent presence. I considered calling the police but hesitated. The idea of staying on the line while someone could be nearby felt terrifying. Instead, I paced the living room, my palms clammy, heart thumping too fast to ignore. I checked the windows, listened carefully, straining to catch any sound of movement outside. The wind shifted, branches scratching against the siding, but no figure emerged. I moved upstairs, every step deliberate, pressing my ear to the walls to detect any irregular sound. The house felt different when I was alone, larger somehow, with shadows pooling in corners that were usually illuminated by light spilling from other rooms. I checked each bedroom, noting that everything was in place, nothing disturbed. My mind kept returning to the back door, the prints, the sense that someone had been just outside the window. I wondered if I had imagined the movement, the weight of my fear coloring my perception. But the prints, tangible and crisp in my mind, would not allow me that comfort. The attic pulled my attention next. I had nearly forgotten about the small trapdoor in the hallway ceiling, a crawl space that hadn't been used in months. Now it felt like the obvious place to investigate, the logical point of entry if someone had accessed the house without forcing a door. I climbed the small ladder slowly, the rungs groaning under my weight, and reached the hatch. Inside, the attic smelled of dust, insulation, and faintly of the rain that had seeped through tiny gaps in the roof. I swept the flashlight over the floorboards, the low beam revealing nothing at first. Then I saw it. A small folded piece of paper, clean and white against the gray dust. I hadn't left it there. I picked it up with shaking hands. The note was typed, a simple message that read, "I know you're alone." The font was plain, mechanical, without flourish or decoration. My chest tightened, and my stomach churned. I pressed the paper to my face, half expecting it to crumble or dissolve into nothing. But it was real, tangible, deliberate. I set it down carefully and descended the ladder, heart hammering, adrenaline keeping my hands unsteady. I didn't sleep. I stayed in the living room, lights on, the laptop shut, ears straining for every sound. The hours crawled slowly. The sun began to rise, painting the walls with soft yellow light. The house, finally illuminated, seemed less threatening, ordinary again. The note had disappeared when I looked back. The footprints melted away with the frost under the warmth of the morning. I told my parents what had happened when they returned, expecting disbelief, and received the standard rational explanations. Wind, animals, perhaps a prank. They checked the house thoroughly, found nothing, no signs of forced entry, nothing missing. I never found out who had left the note, how the prints had appeared, or why someone had chosen that night to enter or approach the house. But the experience left a lasting impression. I reinforced locks, installed cameras, and became acutely aware of every sound and shadow in the house. The woods remained a boundary I approached cautiously, and the sense of vulnerability that night stayed with me, a reminder that the ordinary can feel extraordinary under the right circumstances. That weekend, I had stayed alone, and I had learned that quiet is never truly empty, that stillness carries weight, and that attention to small details can be the difference between fear passing unnoticed and fear becoming real. I never stayed home alone for an extended period again, and whenever I pass a window at night, I pause, listening for movement, watching for shapes, remembering the frost, the note, and the soundless presence that made an ordinary house feel unavoidably alive. I was house-sitting for my uncle while he was in the hospital after a stroke. He lived alone in an old narrow house built long before insulation standards or clean wiring mattered. The place sat between two taller buildings and never saw direct sun. Even during the day, it felt dim. The floors dipped toward the center like the house was tired. Air moved through the vents with slow clicks and groans, not loud, just constant enough to notice. I stayed because his dog needed medication every 6 hours, and the vet had made it clear missing even one dose could cause seizures. The dog was old and calm, a heavy mixed breed with cloudy eyes and stiff legs. He followed me room to room at first, then settled near the couch once I set a routine. I kept the house exactly as I found it. Lights off unless I needed them, doors shut the same way. I locked the back door every time, turning the deadbolt until it stopped. The thermostat sat in a clear plastic case screwed into the wall because my uncle did not trust himself to leave it alone. The key hung on a hook in the kitchen. I never touched it. That night, freezing rain came down hard enough to sound like gravel thrown against the windows. The temperature dropped fast. Around 9, the power flickered. Not fully out, just a quick dip that reset the microwave clock. The vents clicked louder after that. The dog lifted his head and stared down the hallway toward the laundry room. He did not growl. He did not bark. He just watched, unmoving, eyes fixed on the dark gap between the walls. I assumed it was the storm. Old houses reacted to weather. Wood shifted. Pipes complained. I gave the dog his medication and sat back down. 10 minutes later, I felt colder. I checked the thermostat through the plastic cover. The number was lower than before. I knew what it had been set to because my uncle liked it warm. I thought maybe the power flicker had reset it. I unlocked the case, adjusted it back, locked it again, and put the key on the hook. The dog did not move from his spot. He kept staring down the hallway. The laundry room light was off. That room had no windows, just a washer, a dryer, a utility sink, and a narrow door that led to the back stairwell. The back door itself was at the bottom of those stairs. I had checked it earlier. The deadbolt was engaged from the inside. I went to bed fully dressed with a blanket over me. Sleep did not come easy. The vents kept clicking. The rain kept tapping. At some point, the cold woke me. My breath fogged in the air. I sat up and felt it right away, the sharp kind of cold that settles into bone. I walked to the thermostat. It had been turned down again, lower than before. I stood there longer than I meant to. The plastic case was still locked. The screws were tight. The key was still on the hook. I checked my phone to make sure I was awake enough to trust what I was seeing. The time made sense. I was sober. I had not taken anything stronger than coffee all day. I walked through the house and checked each room. Everything looked mostly right, but not exactly. A kitchen cabinet door was open a few inches. I never left them that way. A chair at the dining table was turned slightly, angled toward the hallway. I was careful about chairs because the floor sloped and they rolled if left wrong. I touched the chair. It was cold, colder than the air. The dog stayed near the couch and kept watching the hallway. His body was stiff. His ears were up. I did not force him to move. I locked the bedroom door that night, something I had not done before. I did not sleep. Every hour the cold deepened. Every hour I checked the thermostat. Every hour it was lower. The numbers were steady and deliberate, like someone testing limits. I stopped changing it after the third time. I wanted to see if it would happen again. It did. By morning the house felt like a refrigerator. The dog shivered even with a blanket. I fed him and gave his medication. I checked the back door again. The deadbolt was still turned from the inside. No sign of tampering. No damage. No snow or water tracked in. I searched the laundry room. Behind the washer I found dust disturbed in a narrow line, like something had been dragged lightly across the floor. I pulled the washer out farther and found a small access panel I had not noticed before, cut clean into the drywall near the floor. The screws were newer than the rest of the room. One was loose. Inside was a shallow crawl space that ran behind the walls. Old houses used them for pipes and wiring. I smelled stale air and something else, human and sour. I did not crawl in. I closed the panel and put the washer back. I locked the panel with new screws I found in the garage. I stayed awake the next night. The power flickered again just after midnight. The vents clicked. The dog lifted his head. The thermostat did not change. In the morning, I called for help. I left the house with the dog and waited outside in the cold. When they searched the place, they found signs I had missed. Food wrappers in the crawl space, a thin sleeping mat, hand tools, a narrow path worn into the insulation. The crawl space connected to a shared wall with the building next door, which was vacant. There was a broken vent cover behind stacked trash cans that led straight into the space. The person had been inside the walls before I arrived. They had access to the thermostat wiring through a maintenance panel inside the crawl space, not the control itself. Lowering the temperature likely helped mask their body heat and movement. They stayed hidden when I was home and moved only when the house was quiet. The back door deadbolt had never been touched because they never needed to use it. They did not find the person that day, but they sealed the crawl space and blocked the vent. I did not stay another night. My uncle recovered enough to be moved to a care facility, and the dog went with him. Weeks later, the vacant building next door was cleared out. The crawlspace connection was found from the other side. There was evidence of someone living there for months. The pattern made sense in a way that left no room for doubt. I had not imagined anything. I had not missed something obvious. I had been sharing a house with someone who knew how to stay unseen. I still think about the dog, the way he watched the hallway without sound. He had known before I did. I moved back into my childhood home in late summer of 2019 to help my mother get it ready to sell after my father died. She could not stand to be there anymore, so she stayed with my aunt across town. The house sat empty for months before I arrived. Windows stayed shut. Air went stale. Dust settled into every corner. When I unlocked the front door that first afternoon, the smell hit me right away. A mix of old wood, dry carpet, and something sour that comes from rooms left closed too long. The house was a two-story place with a steep roof and a narrow attic that ran the full length above the second floor. Every sound carried. Floorboards popped when temperatures changed. Pipes knocked when water moved. I told myself that growing up there had trained me to hear ghosts where none existed. I needed that belief. I had boxes to pack, closets to clear, and years of stored things that no one wanted to look at too closely. I slept in my old bedroom on the first floor because the upstairs felt too quiet. The windows up there faced trees and an alley, and the curtains had yellowed with age. Downstairs felt safer. I could hear the refrigerator hum and the old wall clock tick. Those sounds anchored me. The first 2 nights passed without anything that stood out. I worked during the day, sorting papers, wrapping dishes, taping boxes shut. At night, I lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my dad's things still sitting where he left them. Grief made everything feel heavier. I assumed the tiredness came from that. On the 3rd night, I woke just after 1 in the morning to a sound that did not fit. Came from above me. Slow footsteps, spaced apart, like someone pacing carefully. Not heavy, not rushed. Each step pressed into the floor, then released. I lay still and counted them without meaning to. 6 steps, pause. 5 steps back. Another pause. I checked the time on my phone. It was a little after 1. I told myself it was the house settling, which shifts more at night when the temperature drops. I had heard it all my life. Still, the rhythm bothered me. Settling does not pace. The sound stopped after a few minutes. I stayed awake until my eyes burned, then finally slept again. The next morning, I walked through the house looking for anything out of place. Nothing was missing. Doors were locked. Windows stayed shut. I chalked it up to nerves and kept working. By evening, exhaustion pushed the fear back down. That night, it happened again. Same time, between 1 and 1:30. The steps moved slower this time, closer together. I sat up in bed and held my breath. The sound came from the ceiling above the hallway, right below the attic access. I stared at the spot where the pull-down ladder was hidden behind a thin square panel. I waited for the noise to stop. It did, the same way it had before, without warning. I did not sleep after that. The following day, I tried to stay busy. I avoided looking up. When evening came, I checked the locks twice. I placed a chair under my bedroom door even though it felt childish. I lay in bed fully dressed. The footsteps returned. Same window of time. This time they moved from one end of the house to the other. I could trace the path in my mind, from above my parents' room, past the bathroom, toward the spare bedroom. The sound paused longer near the center, right above where the attic ladder rested. Then it reversed. I stayed silent. I did not move. My body felt locked in place. In the morning, I found the attic ladder pull cord had shifted slightly, no longer centered. Could have been nothing. A draft. My own memory playing tricks. Still, I stood on a chair and pulled the ladder down just enough to see the steps. Dust coated everything, thick and gray, except for a series of prints pressed into it, one after another, shaped like worn shoes. They were fresh. I had not gone up there. I knew that without doubt. I lowered the ladder fully and climbed halfway, stopping when the air changed. The attic smelled different than I remembered. Less dry, more human. I shined my phone light across the insulation. A narrow path cut through it, compressed and darker than the rest. I climbed back down and closed the ladder without looking again. I did not call the police. That choice still bothers me. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was damaged. I told myself there had to be an explanation that did not end with sirens and questions. I convinced myself it might be an animal, a raccoon or a cat that found a way in. Animals could make paths. Animals could step in dust. That night, I slept with the lights on. I woke to a shape hovering above me. The attic ladder hung down from the ceiling, fully extended, stopping a few inches above my face. The wooden steps cast long shadows across the walls. I froze where I lay, staring up at the bottom rung. My heart beat so hard it hurt. I listened for breathing. I listened for movement. I heard nothing. Slowly, without sitting up, I reached for my phone and turned on the screen. The time read 1:17 a.m. I slid out of bed and backed toward the door without looking away from the ladder. My legs shook so badly I had to brace against the wall. I grabbed my keys from the dresser and left the room. I did not check the rest of the house. I walked straight out the front door and sat in my car until the sun came up. Later that morning, I returned with a neighbor I trusted. We did not speak much. We searched the house together. In the attic, we found what I had avoided seeing. A sleeping bag tucked between beams. Empty water bottles. Canned food with dates from months earlier. A small flashlight. The path through the insulation led to a vent near the back of the house, loosened just enough to squeeze through. The person had been living there while the house sat empty. They knew the space. They knew the sounds. They moved at night to avoid notice. When I arrived, they stayed hidden, waiting for me to sleep. The footsteps were careful because they were listening to me at the same time. I left that day. My mother hired professionals to clear the house. The attic was sealed. The vent was replaced. Nothing else happened after that. The house sold a few months later. I never spent another night there. Even now, years later, I still wake up sometimes just after 1 in the morning, certain I can hear someone walking above me. 3 of us stayed overnight at my friend's parents' house while they were away. It was meant to be simple, a place to sleep after a long week. No drinking, no drugs, just food, movies, and catching up. The house sat in a quiet neighborhood where the streetlights were spaced far apart and the trees leaned over the road like they were listening. His parents had been gone for a few days already, and the place felt unused but not abandoned. Everything was clean. Nothing was covered. Still felt lived in, just paused. We arrived in the early evening and parked in the driveway. The garage stayed shut. We went through the front door and locked it behind us. The house had a long central hallway that ran from the front door straight to the back kitchen. Bedrooms branched off both sides. The doorbell chime box was mounted high on the hallway wall, a rectangular plastic cover that had yellowed with age. I remembered it from years earlier. It used to make a dull two-tone sound that carried through the whole house. We spent the evening on the couch, lights on, the television low. Outside, the street stayed quiet. No passing cars, no voices, just the hum of distant traffic that never got close. Around midnight, the house had that late-night stillness where every small noise feels louder than it should. The refrigerator clicked. Pipes shifted once, then stopped. The doorbell rang, just once. Clean press, not rushed, not heavy. We all looked toward the front door at the same time. None of us moved right away. The sound felt wrong, not threatening, just out of place. We checked the front window. No one stood on the porch. The street was empty. We opened the camera app connected to the doorbell. No motion alert. No recording. Nothing logged. We assumed it was a glitch. Old wiring. A short from the temperature drop. That explanation felt enough at the time. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. Same length. Same pressure. Same single press. The timing mattered. It was exact. Not random. Not scattered. It landed right when the room had settled back into quiet. We checked the app again. Still nothing. No footage. No missed event. The porch light stayed off. The street stayed empty. We locked the deadbolt even though it already was. We turned on more lights. The house felt different after that, like it had shifted into a listening mode. Every sound felt closer. Every silence felt intentional. We stayed awake. None of us said it, but no one wanted to sleep. Around 1, we walked the house together and checked every door and window. Everything was sealed. The garage door was locked from the inside. The basement door stayed shut. The attic access in the hallway ceiling was closed tight. The doorbell did not ring again for a long time. At some point after 2, when the lights were still on and the television had been muted, the sound came again. This time it was wrong in a way that made my stomach drop. The chime came from the hallway, but it did not echo the way it should have. It sounded closer, duller, like it was being forced. We stood in the hallway and looked up at the chime box. The plastic cover trembled slightly. Not enough to shake loose, just enough to notice. The sound came in short bursts, uneven, like someone was touching metal together by hand. There was no press outside, no button sound, just the chime reacting to something internal. The camera app stayed blank. We turned off the breaker labeled doorbell. The chime stopped. We waited. A full minute passed. Then the chime buzzed again, weaker this time, still vibrating, still active without power from the panel. That was when the fear settled in fully, cold and heavy, without panic but without doubt. The house had old construction. We knew that. Narrow wall cavities, a crawl space above the ceiling that ran over the hallway, wiring that had been rerouted and abandoned over the years. Someone who knew the layout could reach the chime wiring without using the front door. We did not shout. We did not search. We gathered our things quietly and left before sunrise. The sky had just started to gray. The street looked normal again, which made it worse. Nothing chased us. Nothing followed. The house stayed still as we locked the door behind us. None of us went back. Later, after his parents returned, they checked the house with professionals. They found the doorbell wiring cut clean near the transformer. It had been disconnected years earlier during a remodel and never reconnected. The camera system had been updated after that, working on its own power, logging only motion and button presses from the exterior unit. There was no reason for the chime to work at all. In the attic crawlspace above the hallway, they found disturbed insulation leading to the wall cavity behind the chime box. The wiring there had exposed ends, stripped back recently. Pressing them together would trigger the chime without using the doorbell button or the camera system. The breaker would not matter because the circuit was already dead. It relied on stored charge and direct contact. There were no fingerprints, no clear entry point. The attic vent at the back of the house had been loosened, not broken, just shifted enough to move through. It faced a narrow strip of trees behind the property, hidden from the street. The explanation was simple in structure and hard to accept in reality. Someone had known the house. Someone had known the wiring. They waited until the parents left, tested the system, and realized they could interact with the inside of the house without being seen. The first rings were tests. The timing showed intent. The final sound came from impatience or confidence. Nothing was stolen because nothing needed to be. The point was contact, not theft. Proof of access. Control without visibility. The wiring was removed completely after that. The attic was sealed. Motion sensors were added. Nothing else happened. I still think about the sound of that chime vibrating under its plastic cover. Not loud, not violent, just deliberate. The kind of sound that tells you someone is close enough to touch the walls while you stand on the other side, listening. I was staying alone in my cousin's mountain cabin while waiting for a work transfer to come through. It was meant to be temporary, a quiet place to save money and stay out of the way. The cabin sat on a ridge above a long stretch of forest, far enough from town that there were no neighbors for miles. The road in was a narrow dirt track that twisted uphill and ended at the cabin. Past that, there was nothing but trees, rock, and steep drop-offs. The cabin itself was small and old but solid, built on short stilts because of the slope, with a wooden staircase leading up to a single front door. The stairs were narrow and uneven, each step worn smooth in the center from years of boots. The railing was loose and creaked when leaned on. At night, when the wind moved through the trees, The whole place made quiet sounds that blended together. I got used to those quickly. I kept a routine, locked the door every night, checked the windows, turned off the generator before bed, and relied on battery lanterns and a headlamp. Cell service was weak but usable if I stood near the window facing the valley. I did not drink. I did not invite anyone over. I stayed inside after dark. That night had been colder than the others. Frost formed early, coating the railing and the steps with a thin white layer that caught moonlight. I went to bed fully dressed under heavy blankets. The wind was low. The forest was quiet. I woke to a sound that did not belong to the cabin. Came from below me, outside. Not footsteps, not the sharp tap of boots on wood. It was slower, a shifting sound. Weight being placed carefully, then adjusted. The stairs creaked, but not in the pattern I knew. When I used them, the center step complained the loudest. This sound pressed heavier in the middle for a moment, then eased off toward the edges, like balance being tested. I stayed still and listened. The sound climbed one step at a time. Each movement took longer than it should have. Whoever or whatever it was did not rush. The wood reacted differently than it did with a person walking upright. There was a pause on each step, then a subtle slide, like weight transferring from hands to feet or the other way around. My heart rate stayed slow at first. Shock kept it that way. I told myself it could be an animal, a bear or a large deer trying to reach the porch. But animals moved differently. They scraped. They slipped. This was controlled. The sound reached the top step and stopped. I lay in the dark and waited. My breathing felt loud in my ears. I forced it shallow. Outside the door, something shifted again. Closer now, right on the porch boards. The boards dipped slightly. The pressure stayed there. Then I heard breathing. Not loud, not forced, just steady air moving in and out. It came from the other side of the door, close enough that I could hear the slight wet sound at the end of each exhale. It stayed at the height of the handle but never touched it. The knob did not turn. The lock did not move. I stared at the door and watched frost slowly creep along the edges of the glass pane as the cold deepened. The breathing continued for a long time. Long enough that my legs went numb. Long enough that my mind tried to build explanations and failed. If it was a person, they would knock. They would test the handle. They would make themselves known. If it was an animal, it would sniff, scratch, or move on. This did neither. At some point, the breathing shifted farther from the door, just enough to change the sound. The weight lifted from the porch. I heard the stairs creak again, this time descending, the same slow transfer of pressure. Then nothing. I did not sleep again. When morning came, light filled the cabin slowly, filtered through the trees. The frost outside thickened overnight, untouched except for one place. I waited until full daylight before opening the door. Cold air rushed in. The porch boards showed marks pressed into the frost. Long impressions, not round, not patterned like boots. They were uneven, stretched, with deeper pressure at one end and shallow drag marks trailing off. On the stairs, the frost told the rest of it. The center of each step showed a heavy depression, but the edges had lighter marks, like hands or the sides of shoes pressing while something climbed low, using all points of contact. There were no clear animal prints, no claws, no pads, just elongated shapes where frost had been crushed and smeared. I walked down slowly, careful not to disturb anything. At the base of the stairs, the impressions led off into the trees, not toward the road. They disappeared where the frost thinned under thicker cover. I took photos with my phone. I checked the area around the cabin. Nothing else was disturbed. No attempt to break in. No marks on the door or windows. Just the stairs and the porch. Later that day, I hiked down to a ranger station several miles away. I showed them the photos. They recognized the pattern immediately. A person had been climbing using a low profile, likely wearing worn boots and gloves, distributing weight to avoid noise. The breathing made sense too. Someone crouched close to the door, listening, waiting. They told me about people who moved through the area quietly, using cabins as checkpoints. Transients, sometimes workers moving between sites, sometimes people avoiding roads altogether. The marks did not match animal behavior. They matched someone trained to move slowly, deliberately, without drawing attention. The stairs creaked differently because the weight was not upright. The pressure shifted because they were climbing on all fours to stay below the window line. They did not touch the handle because they did not want to announce themselves or leave prints. They listened to see if the cabin was occupied. When they realized it was, they left. That explanation settled everything into place. The sound, the breathing, the lack of forced entry, the choice to approach silently and retreat the same way. I packed that afternoon. I did not stay another night. Before leaving, I removed the stairs entirely and stacked them inside. I locked the door and left a note for my cousin explaining what happened and why the place needed more security. The transfer came through a week later. I moved on. I still think about the way the stairs sounded under that slow weight, how the wood reacted to something careful and practiced. What stays with me most is not fear, but the patience. The fact that someone stood inches away, breathing quietly, deciding what to do next, and chose to leave without ever being seen. I installed indoor cameras because I lived alone and traveled for work. It was not fear that pushed me to do it at first. It was habit. I spent too many nights in hotels staring at ceilings and wanted the comfort of checking on my place from anywhere. I mounted small cameras in the main hallway, the living room, and the guest room. I did not put one in my bedroom. That felt unnecessary and invasive, even to myself. The guest room sat at the end of the hall, stayed empty. No furniture except a bed frame and a bare mattress leaned against the wall. The door stayed closed because the room smelled faintly of old paint and cardboard. I had no reason to open it. Weeks passed without incident. Motion alerts came and went as expected. Sunlight through the windows, shadows from passing cars, the robot vacuum. Nothing unusual. I grew used to checking footage only when I was away. One night, I was home between trips and restless. I could not sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I opened the camera app on my phone out of boredom. I scrolled through old clips, fast-forwarding without focus, just killing time. That was when I noticed the guest room alerts. There were more than I expected. Dozens. All logged late at night. Most between midnight and 3. I assumed it was a glitch. The camera was older than the others. Maybe a sensitivity issue. I tapped one of the clips. The video loaded slowly. The angle showed the guest room door from inside the room, facing outward toward the hallway. The door was closed at the start of the clip. The timestamp showed a date from 2 weeks earlier. I watched. Nothing happened for several seconds. Then the handle side of the door shifted inward. Slowly, the door opened a few inches, stopped, and held. After a pause, it closed again just as slowly until the latch clicked back into place. No shadows crossed the hall. No light changed. The air in the room did not move. The motion alert ended. I sat up in bed and replayed it. Then again, I checked the next clip. Same movement, different night, same slow open, same pause, same close, always smooth, never jerky. Always stopping at the same angle like it met resistance or a limit it knew not to cross. I checked the AC status. It was off. The vents were quiet. I had turned everything down before bed. The windows were closed. No fans were running. No airflow I could point to. I checked the timestamps again. Every clip happened while I was asleep in my bedroom at the other end of the hall. Not once during the day. Not once while I was awake in the living room. Always late, always the same. I got out of bed and stood in the hallway. The house felt normal. Still, I opened the guest room door and let it go. It stayed where I left it. I pushed it gently and watched how it moved. It did not swing freely. The hinges resisted slightly, then caught. The latch fit tight. I tested air pressure. I opened and closed other doors. Nothing caused that slow movement. Nothing recreated the motion I saw on video. I did not sleep after that. I stayed on the couch with the lights on until morning. The next day, I watched every clip from the past month. There were more than I thought. The pattern was exact. Same time range, same movement, same duration. Some nights it happened once. Some nights twice. Never more, never less. What scared me was not the door itself. It was the idea that something had been happening inside my home every night without my knowledge, without sound, without presence. Something quiet enough to avoid waking me. I checked the house top to bottom. I found nothing missing, nothing disturbed, no signs of entry. The locks were intact. The windows were sealed. The attic hatch in the hallway ceiling was closed and dust-covered. No footprints, no drag marks. I considered the possibility of a person and rejected it slowly. There was no reason to open and close that door without entering the room. No benefit, no escalation, no mistakes. It was too controlled and too repetitive. I started paying attention to other systems in the house. I reviewed utility logs, water usage, power spikes, anything that matched the timestamps. That was when I noticed the water heater. It was electric, located in a closet behind the guest room. I rarely thought about it. It ran on a timer that kicked on late at night to take advantage of lower rates. I stood in the hallway that night and waited. At 12:47 a.m., the heater activated. I heard a low hum, not loud, just enough to register. At the same time, the bathroom exhaust fan down the hall kicked on. I had forgotten it was on an automatic humidity sensor. Turned itself on and off without warning. I watched the guest room door. It did not move at first. Then, slowly, the pressure in the hallway changed. I felt it in my ears. The door shifted inward, just like on the footage. It stopped halfway. The fan shut off. The door eased back into place. The house was not haunted. It was poorly balanced. The heater pulled air from the surrounding space. The exhaust fan pushed air out. The guest room door, with its tight latch and uneven hinges, became a pressure valve. Every night, the same systems activated. Every night, the same slow movement happened. The camera caught it because motion detection does not understand cause. It only understands change. The reason it only happened while I slept was simple. I ran nothing during the day. I showered earlier. The fan stayed off. The heater timer stayed set. The house followed its routine. I adjusted the hinges the next day. I added a door sweep. I changed the heater schedule. The motion alerts stopped. I slept better after that, but not right away. For weeks, I woke up at night expecting to see movement where none existed. I checked the app too often. I watched live feeds until my eyes hurt. Even with an explanation, trust did not come back fast. What stayed with me was not fear of something unknown. It was the idea that my house had been active without me, performing the same quiet motion every night while I lay unaware a few rooms away. Not watched, not threatened, just present. Knowing the cause did not erase the feeling of being left out of my own space. It only explained it. I still live alone. I still travel. The cameras are still there. But I no longer review footage out of boredom. Some things are easier to live with when you do not watch them happen. I broke into my old apartment because I had nowhere else to go and one night felt survivable. The eviction had been fast and clean on paper and ugly in real life. The locks were the same because management had not changed them yet. The hallway smelled the way it always had. Old paint and dust and something sour from the trash chute. The building was quiet in the way empty places get quiet, not peaceful, just hollow. I used the spare key I never returned and eased the door open with my shoulder pressed tight, listening for any sound that would mean I was about to get caught. The utilities were shut off. The apartment felt dead. The air was cold and stale, like a room that had been sealed. The refrigerator was empty and unplugged. The hum I remembered gone. The windows were black mirrors. I closed the door behind me without letting it latch all the way and stood there, counting my breathing. I did not turn on a light because there were none to turn on. I used my phone for a moment, then shut it off to save battery and to keep the place dark. I slept on the floor in the living room because my old bedroom felt too personal and because the carpet there had always been thinner. I laid my jacket down as a pillow and kept my shoes on. The floor was cold through the fabric. The walls held every small sound. Pipes ticked somewhere far away. The building made settling noises that I recognized but did not trust anymore. I watched the faint outline of the door until my eyes adjusted. I did not sleep well. My body kept jolting awake at nothing. Each time I tried to place the sounds in my head to sort old from new. I knew the creak by the window meant the wind. I knew the thud below meant someone upstairs turning over in bed. The building was not empty. That made it worse. People were near and I was not supposed to be there. Sometime before dawn, when the dark lightened just enough to tell time without a clock, I heard keys rattling at the door. It was close, metal against metal, quick and careful, the sound of a hand that knew the weight of the ring. The handle moved a fraction. The lock resisted. The sound stopped. There was no knock, no voice, no footstep moving away. The hallway stayed silent. My body locked. I lay flat on my back with my arms tight to my sides. I did not reach for my phone. I did not shift my weight. I kept my eyes open until they burned. The air felt thinner. My heartbeat was loud enough that I worried it would carry through the door. I imagined the shape of a person standing there, head close to the peephole, listening for any sign that the place was empty. Minutes stretched in a way that felt unreal. The dark held. Nothing else happened. The handle did not move again. The keys did not return. I stayed where I was because moving felt like a risk and staying still felt like control. I focused on small details to keep my mind from running. A stain on the ceiling that looked like a map. A scuff on the baseboard I had meant to clean before everything fell apart. The smell of dust and old carpet glue. I did not sleep after that. I waited for light. When the sky outside shifted from black to gray, the room took on shape. The door was just a door again. The fear did not leave, but it thinned. I sat up slowly and listened. The building woke in pieces. Water ran somewhere. A distant door closed. A cough traveled through the vents. I stood and stretched my legs, feeling the ache from the floor. I decided to leave as soon as I could do it without drawing attention. I gathered my jacket and checked the lock from the inside, careful not to make noise. It was the same lock I remembered, the same scratch by the plate. Nothing looked forced. I hesitated before opening the door and leaned close to the peephole out of habit. That was when I saw the tape. A strip of dark tape was pressed over the peephole from the inside. It was cut clean and smoothed flat. It blocked the small circle completely. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember a reason it would be there. I never taped it. I never covered it for privacy or light. I had no reason to. The tape was new. The adhesive edges were clean. There was no dust on it. The detail landed heavier than the keys. The tape meant someone had been inside the apartment at some point after I left. Not maintenance, because they never worked like that. Not me. The placement was precise. It would block anyone in the hall from seeing light or movement inside. It would make the apartment look empty even if it was not. I peeled the tape back slowly, came off with a soft pull and left a faint residue. I pressed my eye to the glass and looked out. The hallway was empty. The carpet runner showed fresh lines from a vacuum. The light fixture hummed. Everything looked normal in the way normal things do when they are not. I left without locking the door behind me. My steps were quiet. I kept my head down and moved like I belonged there. Outside, the air felt sharp and clean. I stood on the sidewalk and let the morning settle into me. Later, when my head was clearer, the pieces fit together in a way I did not like but could explain. After the eviction, the building had problems with people breaking into vacant units. Management had told tenants to report any open doors. Someone with access had been checking apartments early, before people woke up, looking for signs of occupancy. The keys made sense then. A master ring would sound like that. The pause after the lock resisted made sense too. If the place was supposed to be empty, a locked door would mean nothing. The tape made the most sense of all. Someone had taped the peephole to see if the unit was being used without tipping off whoever might be inside. It would hide light at night. It would keep eyes from meeting. That person tried the door and stopped because there was no sign of life. I had been there the whole time, inches away, breathing shallow on the floor. The tape had been placed earlier, likely the day before, when someone did a quiet sweep and prepared the unit to look vacant. I had slept under a test meant to catch people like me. I never went back. I turned the spare key in at the office and said nothing else. The image that stayed with me was not the door or the sound of the keys. It was the neat strip of tape, pressed flat with care, doing its job while I lay in the dark believing I was alone. I moved into the duplex after my breakup because it was cheap and available the same week. The landlord lived out of town and handled everything by email. The place was one half of a long, low building at the edge of a quiet neighborhood where the streetlights stopped working years ago. My unit sat on the far end, sharing only one wall. The other half had been empty for months. I knew that because the windows were always dark and the lawn between the two doors had grown wild. I told myself that meant privacy. I told myself a lot of things that first week. The night this happened, I was alone and planned to stay that way. I had groceries, my phone charged, and a headache from a long shift. The weather was calm, no wind, no rain, no reason for noise. I locked the door out of habit even though the deadbolt felt loose. The lock turned with a soft grind that made my stomach tighten. I checked it twice. I checked the back door once. The windows were old but intact. Nothing felt wrong enough to name. I ate standing at the counter because the dining light flickered. The living room smelled faintly of dust and old wood. The previous tenant had left behind a few pieces of furniture that the landlord said I could use. A couch with sagging cushions. A coffee table with a burn mark. I sat on the couch and scrolled until my eyes blurred. The silence felt thick, not peaceful, heavy. Around 10, I heard a sound from the shared wall. It was low and brief, like something brushing against wood. I assumed it was the building settling or a raccoon outside. The duplex backed up to a narrow strip of trees. I had already heard animals moving there at night. I waited. Nothing followed. My headache pulsed behind my eyes. I went to bed early. The bedroom sat at the back, closest to the trees. The window faced the dark yard. I pulled the curtains shut and lay down without turning off the lamp. The mattress dipped toward the middle. The ceiling fan was off. I needed stillness. Sometime after midnight, a sharp smell woke me. Not smoke. Something sour and metallic. I sat up and listened. The house was quiet. The smell faded after a minute. I told myself it was the plumbing. The pipes knocked now and then. I lay back down and stared at the ceiling until my eyes adjusted to the dim light. That was when I heard the second sound. Came from inside the house. A slow scrape, careful like fabric dragged across a rough surface. It stopped. My body went cold before my mind caught up. I held my breath. The sound came again, farther away, closer to the living room. I stayed still. I counted seconds. The sound did not repeat. I told myself it was the house shifting. Old places made noises. I had lived in worse. I reached for my phone and checked the time. 12:47. No missed calls. No alerts. I turned off the lamp and lay in the dark. That was a mistake. Without light, every small noise grew shape. The refrigerator hummed. The walls ticked. Somewhere, a faint click repeated at uneven intervals. I could not place it. I turned the lamp back on. The click stopped. I sat up and listened again. The air felt different, cooler, as if a door had opened somewhere. I swung my legs over the bed and stood. The floor was cold. I walked to the bedroom door and opened it slowly. The hall light was off. The living room beyond was dark. I smelled that sour metallic scent again, stronger now. I did not call out. I did not move forward. I stood and listened. The click returned once, then silence. I closed the bedroom door and locked it. The lock was a simple push button, not solid, but it was something. I backed away and sat on the bed. My heart beat hard enough to shake my hands. I stayed there for a long time, watching the door. Nothing touched the handle. Nothing scraped. The smell faded. I slept in short bursts. Each time I woke, I checked the door. It stayed closed. When my alarm went off at 6, the sky outside the window was gray. I felt foolish and exhausted. Daylight made the fear feel thin. I went to the kitchen to make coffee. That was when I saw the first clear sign. One of the cabinet doors under the sink was open. I knew I had closed it because the hinge squeaked and annoyed me. I stared at the dark space beneath the sink. Cleaning bottles sat where I left them. No water leak. No reason for the door to be open. I walked through the living room. The couch cushions were slightly shifted, as if someone had pressed down and then stood up. The front door was still locked. The deadbolt had not moved. The back door was the same. The windows were closed. I told myself I had moved the cushions without remembering. I told myself the cabinet door had never been shut. I finished my coffee with shaking hands and went to work. All day, the smell stayed in my nose. I replayed the sounds. The scrape. The click. I searched the address online during my break. Nothing came up except the rental listing. No news. No reports. I texted the landlord about the loose deadbolt. He replied hours later and said he would look at it next week. That night, I came home with lights on in every room. I checked the locks again. I checked the windows again. I ate in the living room this time, facing the hall. The silence returned, heavy as before. Around 11, the scrape came back. This time it was closer, beneath my feet. A soft dragging sound from under the floor. My breath caught. The house was built on a crawl space. I knew that. Most older places were. The sound moved slowly from the living room toward the kitchen. I stood without thinking and pressed my ear to the floor. The sound stopped. I stayed frozen, ear against the cold wood, listening so hard it hurt. After a long moment, there was a faint thud. Then nothing. I stepped back and locked myself in the bathroom. I sat on the tub and waited. My phone screen glowed in the dark. I did not call anyone. I did not know what I would say. After an hour, the house stayed quiet. I left the bathroom and went to bed with the lamp on. Sleep did not come. In the morning, I inspected the outside of the building. Behind the duplex, near the shared wall, I saw disturbed dirt. The crawlspace vent cover hung loose, bent inward. The screws were gone. The opening behind it was black. I felt sick. I called in sick. I went back inside and searched the house from front to back. I found nothing until I checked the hall closet. The floor panel inside had been lifted. It led down into the crawlspace. The edges were scratched. The smell came from below. I did not go down there. I left the house and called the police from my car. They came and searched the crawlspace. They found food wrappers, a thin blanket, and a small flashlight. They found shoe prints in the dirt that led from the open vent to the space beneath my floor. They told me someone had been using it for weeks, moving through the crawlspace and coming up when the house was empty. They believed he had hidden when I came home and moved only when he thought I was asleep. The explanation landed hard and clear. The scrape was fabric on wood. The click was the flashlight. The smell was sweat and rust. The open cabinet and shifted cushions were mistakes made in the dark. I never slept there again. The landlord sealed the crawlspace and replaced the locks. I broke the lease and moved out. The police later told me they caught a man living in the empty half of the duplex. He had been using the crawlspace to move between units. He admitted he had watched me through the vents at night to learn my schedule. I still check the floors in every place I live. I still notice smells before sounds. At night, when a house settles, I stay awake long enough to be sure it is only the house. I was 17, home alone for the weekend while my parents traveled for work. The house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural at first, not just empty but almost too still. It was early spring, the kind of night when the air carries a bite that makes your skin prickle even when the moon is out. Around 11:50 p.m., I had just finished cleaning the kitchen and washing the last of the dishes, the sound of running water in the sink echoing unervingly against the walls. Our house backed up to woods, dense and dark, where the trees leaned together like they were whispering to one another. I had walked past those woods hundreds of times, seen deer and foxes and the occasional raccoon, but that night it felt like they were holding their breath. I was sitting in the living room, the only light coming from the floor lamp near the couch, the rest of the house cloaked in shadow. My laptop was open, but I wasn't really paying attention. The quiet was heavy. I tried to convince myself that it was just the absence of my parents that made every creak and groan in the house stand out. The floorboards under my feet made soft, almost polite noises as I shifted my weight, and the wind outside rattled the branches against the windows. That was normal. I told myself over and over it was normal. Then I heard it. A subtle thump against the glass in the sliding door at the back of the house. The kind of sound you might mistake for a branch hitting the pane, but it was sharper, deliberate. My heart jumped, and I froze. It was quiet again, but my body refused to relax. I didn't want to move, didn't want to look, because instinctively I knew I should. I eventually forced myself to get up, each step on the wooden floor loud and slow, feeling the weight of the night pressing against me. When I reached the sliding door, nothing was there, just the black blur of the woods. The trees swayed in the wind, shadows twisting in ways that made them look like figures watching from the darkness. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, a trick of the mind, a raccoon or a loose branch, but the pit of unease in my stomach refused to go away. I moved back to the couch and sat down, leaving the lamp on. My phone rested on the armrest. I debated calling my parents, but I knew it would be the same reassurance they always gave. It's just the woods, the wind, the house settling. I didn't need their words to tell me that. My unease had shifted from curiosity to a tangible pressure. Every tiny noise seemed amplified. The fridge hummed. A floorboard creaked in the hall. Somewhere in the distance, an animal yipped. My pulse was loud in my ears, each beat echoing the fear I tried to suppress. I decided to check the back door again. Something compelled me, not courage, not bravery, just the need to know. The hallway was darker than the living room. The moonlight through the windows barely cut through the shadows. I stopped at the foot of the sliding door and looked out. The backyard was empty. The woods pressed against the edge of the yard, black and motionless. And for a moment I almost relaxed, almost believed the rational explanation. Then I noticed footprints in the thin layer of frost on the patio. Not my parents', not mine, not even animal prints. Human footprints, bare, small but not tiny, walking from the edge of the woods to the door and stopping just short of it. My chest tightened. I pressed my forehead to the glass, straining to see in the darkness. But there was nothing. Nothing moving, nothing waiting. Just the prints, impossibly clear, like someone had been standing there moments ago. I backed away slowly, my mind racing. It didn't make sense. How could someone be there, leave prints, and vanish without a sound or trace? I considered calling the police but hesitated. The logical part of my brain screamed to do it, but a deeper, paralyzing instinct told me to remain calm, to watch, to wait. I left the sliding door and crept to the window that looked out over the side of the house. The woods were dark, endless. Branches shook lightly in the wind, casting long, moving shadows. My eyes scanned every shape, every corner. I wanted to see the person who had left the prints, but I also didn't want to see. Hours passed. I stayed awake, moving from room to room, lights on, listening. I heard the faint scuff of shoes against the hardwood upstairs, soft but deliberate, like someone pacing. I had been the only one home, yet the sound of feet echoed above me, moving slowly across the hallway where my parents' rooms were. My stomach twisted. I considered going upstairs to check, but stopped myself. I had a baseball bat in the closet. I gripped it tightly, its weight reassuring in my hands. At some point, I realized the sounds weren't coming from upstairs. They were coming from the attic, the crawl space hatch in the hallway ceiling. I had almost forgotten it existed. A small trapdoor with a pull string, dusty and undisturbed for months. Now I could hear faint shuffling above, the soft scrape of something moving, like someone dragging their fingers across wood. The attic light wasn't connected, so the space above remained a black void. My hands shook as I climbed the small ladder, each rung groaning under my weight. When I reached the attic, there was nothing visible. No shadow, no person. Just the musty smell of old insulation and the faint, lingering scent of something I couldn't identify. Then I saw it. A small, folded piece of paper on the floor. I hadn't put it there. It was typed, simple, nothing fancy. It read, "I see you." The print was crisp, mechanical, like it had come from a computer. My mind went blank. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I dropped the paper and scrambled down the ladder, heart hammering. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the living room until the first light of dawn broke through the blinds, washing the house in pale orange. When my parents returned, I told them what happened. The police came and checked the house, found no signs of forced entry, no footprints in the frost beyond what I had seen. The attic was empty, nothing unusual. The prints had disappeared, the note gone. They suggested a raccoon or an animal and insisted the note must have been a prank. But I knew it wasn't a prank. I knew the prints were real. I never found out who had been there or how they had entered and left without a trace. After that night, I installed extra locks, security cameras, motion lights, anything to keep the house secure. I never stayed home alone again. The woods remained dark and still, and I never walked past the back of the house without checking twice. The feeling of being watched, of someone moving unseen, stayed with me long after the prints vanished. I could never shake it, and I never will.